I never thought my life would unravel in my own home. I had built everything carefully, my career, my house, my family. Everything was supposed to be perfect. My name is Robert, and I've always believed in trust. Trust in my friends, trust in my family, and most dangerously, trust in my own blood. I'm not young anymore. 62, with silver streaks running through my dark hair and a spine that aches when I sit too long. But I was sharp, always sharp. People said I had a keen eye for people, that I could smell deception from a mile away. Funny how life has a way of teaching you humility, sometimes painfully. My daughter, Emily, is married to Michael, a man I thought I could respect. He's charming, articulate, always polite to my face. But charm can be dangerous when it masks ambition. Michael came into our lives 10 years ago, and slowly I noticed subtle shifts, minor disagreements between Emily and me. Subtle suggestions from Michael about finances, property, things I had thought were untouchable. Still, I tried to trust. I tried to believe the bonds of family were stronger than greed. I had always been proud of my home, a modest estate with memories etched into every corner. From the hardwood floors, I laid myself to the backyard where Emily first rode her bike. Everything held a piece of my life. But that pride, I would soon learn, made me vulnerable. It began subtly, small incidents that didn't make sense at first. A missing check here, a signed document I didn't remember signing there. I chalked it up to age, to forgetfulness. I even joked about it to Emily. You know, my memory isn't what it used to be. I laughed to mask the creeping unease that gnawed at me. Late at night, alone in my study, I would replay conversations in my head. Michael's suggestions about changing the way I held certain accounts. Emily's oddly defensive reactions when I asked questions about family finances. Little things, meaningless in isolation, but together, they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. I started keeping a journal, not knowing exactly why. Perhaps intuition, or maybe a growing suspicion that the people I loved most were not who they appeared to be. Each entry I wrote felt heavier, as if the pen itself carried the weight of secrets yet to reveal themselves. Then came the day that changed everything. I answered the door to find a man in a crisp white coat, holding a clipboard and smiling with unsettling confidence. He claimed to be a doctor sent by Michael to evaluate my memory, saying Emily was concerned. "Just a routine check, Mr. Harris," he said, his voice silky and precise. But I knew. Instinct screamed at me before my mind could catch up. Something about him, the way he avoided my eyes, the slight tremor in his smile, didn't fit. I felt a cold trickle of fear, the kind that creeps down your spine when you realize the ground beneath you is no longer solid. And in that moment, I understood my trust had been weaponized against me. My family, my own blood, had already turned against me in ways I couldn't yet fully see. The man called himself Dr. Larkin. His voice was calm, clinical, almost rehearsed. He asked me simple questions at first: my name, my date of birth, the president, the day of the week. I answered automatically, hiding the unease curling in my stomach. But the questions became stranger, more invasive, and the way he wrote on his clipboard, so deliberately, so smugly, made my blood run cold. "You're showing signs of memory loss, Mr. Harris," he said, tilting his glasses down on his nose. "It's subtle, but noticeable. Emily is right to be concerned." I froze. My daughter's concern, or was it Michael's? A seed of doubt I hadn't allowed myself to entertain bloomed into a thorny, poisonous thought. This wasn't about my health. This was about control. "Jeker, Larkin, who sent you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Michael, of course." I didn't need him to admit it. I didn't need Emily to speak up. Their faces, their smiles, their reassurances had been rehearsed so many times that they had perfected the mask. But now the cracks showed, tiny fissures I could see in the corners of their eyes. "Doctor," Larkin handed me a small form and said, "Please sign here, acknowledging the results." I noticed the line read more like consent to transfer financial authority than any medical acknowledgement. "Is this really necessary?" I asked, studying the paper with suspicion. Emily stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Dad, it's just precautionary," she said softly. "Michael and I just want to make sure you're okay." But I wasn't okay. And I knew deep down that I never would be, not with them. As soon as the door closed behind Dr. Larkin, I rifled through the papers he had left behind. Nothing medical, nothing logical, just legal jargon that seemed carefully designed to strip me of authority over my own accounts and property. They weren't just questioning my memory. They were trying to erase my control, to make me doubt myself enough to hand over everything I had built. I felt a surge of fury I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. My own family, the people I had trusted most, were plotting against me. And they had done it with elegance, with precision, with that infuriating veneer of concern. I sat in my study, the papers spread across the desk like a battlefield. I ran my hands over my face and whispered to myself, "They think I'm losing my mind, but they'll see who's really in control." And in that moment, a strange clarity came over me. I understood the depth of the deception. Every smile, every gentle word, every act of care, it had been a lie, a performance. They had weaponized my love for them, my trust, my pride in my memory. I realized something else: if I reacted impulsively, if I confronted them blindly, I would lose. But if I waited, if I watched, if I planned, I could turn the tables. And I would. The night after Dr. Larkin left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. Every memory of Emily as a little girl, every birthday, every late night talk about school and dreams, it all felt tainted now, like someone had sprayed ink over a photograph. My own daughter had been part of this plot. My own blood. Anger warred with disbelief inside me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted them so completely? I felt a tightening in my chest, a cold weight pressing down, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a financial betrayal. It was an existential one. They wanted to rewrite my life, erase my authority, and leave me powerless in the home I had built. And yet, part of me ached for them, for Emily. I kept asking myself the same question over and over: had she been coerced, manipulated by Michael? Or had she chosen this path willingly? The uncertainty gnawed at me, twisting my emotions into a knot I couldn't unravel. I paced the study, stopping at the photographs on the walls. Emily laughing at her graduation. Michael shaking my hand at our last dinner party. I remembered the warmth, the smiles, the trust, and it made the betrayal sting sharper. I felt foolish, almost childlike in my vulnerability. But then anger bubbled up, hot and relentless. I thought about every instance where I had ignored the signs. Every time I brushed off my gut instinct, my pride had blinded me. My love had been exploited. And now I realized I had a choice. I could crumble, become a victim, fade into the background, or I could fight. I couldn't let them win. Not them. Not Emily, though the thought of confronting her made my chest ache in ways I couldn't name. I kept replaying scenarios in my head, imagining conversations, imagining confrontations, imagining them realizing too late that I had seen through the mask. But fear lingered, too. Not the fear of Michael's schemes or Emily's betrayal, but the fear that I might lose myself in this pursuit of revenge. Could I strike back without becoming the very thing I despised? Could I outmaneuver them without letting my own morality slip? I felt the darkness creeping in, and I had to remind myself I wasn't just fighting for money or property. I was fighting for my identity, for the truth of who I was. I spent hours staring at the city lights, my mind racing. Every scenario had variables, risks, and consequences. Every step forward required patience, cunning, and restraint. The emotional toll was immense. I felt like I was balancing on a tightrope above an abyss, the slightest misstep spelling disaster. And yet, amidst the fear and pain, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had been blind, yes, but only for a moment. Now I could see everything, like a map laid bare. Their weaknesses, their arrogance, their assumptions about me. They had underestimated me. That mistake would be their undoing. The next morning I awoke with a cold determination I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal was no longer just a wound, it was a call to action. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, staring out the window at the early light creeping over the city, and I began mapping my strategy. Every step had to be precise, every move calculated. Impulse would be my undoing, patience would be my weapon. I started with research. Michael's habits, his business dealings, the accounts they controlled, everything. I combed through files, old emails, public records, anything that could give me leverage. Hours turned into days, and I barely slept, my mind running like a machine, cataloging every vulnerability. Michael's pride was his weakness. He trusted no one but himself, and that arrogance would be the key. I also observed Emily, quietly, from afar at first. I watched her routines, the way she moved through the house, how she interacted with staff, the subtle exchanges she shared with Michael that might betray their plans. There was love there once. I could still see it in her eyes at times, but it had been corrupted by fear, greed, or ambition. That part I couldn't yet untangle. I knew I needed allies. People who could operate in the shadows, who could validate my suspicions, who wouldn't be swayed by charm or deceit. Old friends, former colleagues, even a lawyer I had trusted for years. I reached out, cautiously, presenting fragments of my case without revealing the full picture. The reaction was always the same: concern, disbelief, and finally, recognition. They had seen this kind of manipulation before. They knew the stakes. Then came the psychological preparation. I needed to steel myself against confrontation, against the emotional manipulation that had worked so effectively on me before. I practiced conversations in front of the mirror, imagining the smug, rehearsed expressions Michael would wear. I imagined Emily's protests, her pleas, her disbelief. I forced myself to remain cold, controlled, unshakable. To succeed, I had to become someone I wasn't sure I wanted to be, but someone I had to be. I also built contingencies, multiple layers of backup plans. If one approach failed, I had another ready. Michael would think he was playing me, but in reality, I would be 3 steps ahead at every turn. I considered every possible variable: friends who might betray me, witnesses who could be coerced, financial loopholes that could be exploited. Every detail was a thread in a web I intended to trap them in. By the end of the week, I had a blueprint. It wasn't just about exposing them or reclaiming control. It was about making them feel the consequences of their arrogance. Michael would understand that manipulating a man like me was a grave mistake. Emily, well, I wasn't sure if she deserved the same lesson, but she would witness the truth. And sometimes that is punishment enough. Every night I returned to my study, reviewing notes, refining strategies, replaying every potential scenario in my head. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a battlefield, and I was preparing for war. But unlike Michael, unlike Emily, I wouldn't let my emotions dictate my actions. I would act like a surgeon, precise, deliberate, and merciless when necessary. The day I decided to make my first move, the house felt colder than usual. I told Emily I had an appointment out of town, a fabricated story about a property evaluation. Michael's eyes flickered, just for a moment, but he hid it quickly. Pride, arrogance, overconfidence, that was always his weakness. I used it. I started small, planting seeds of doubt. Anonymous calls to his business associates, subtle hints about discrepancies in financial records, documents, misplaced, in plain sight. Nothing that could be traced back to me directly, just enough to make him twitch, to force him to question his own security. And it worked. The first time I saw him flinch, a tiny crease of anxiety forming on his forehead, I felt a thrill that was almost intoxicating. I also began my psychological games with Emily. A misplaced note here, a carefully timed question there. Did you know Michael spent that much on the renovation without telling you? I'd ask casually, letting the words hang in the air. She would flush, stammer, and retreat, and I watched the cracks in their alliance begin to show. I didn't attack her directly. I watched, measured, waiting for her to reveal where her loyalties truly lay. Meanwhile, I gathered evidence. Hidden in plain sight were receipts, signed forms, email chains. Everything that Michael and Emily thought they had hidden from me. I photographed, copied, and cataloged it meticulously. Each piece was a thread in the web I was weaving, a thread that would eventually trap them completely. The subtle manipulation began to affect Michael in ways he didn't anticipate. A minor error in his accounting, a misstep in communication, a client asking questions he couldn't answer convincingly, small, almost accidental events that I had orchestrated. The house, which he had assumed was his playground, was slowly becoming a hall of mirrors. Every step he took, every move he made, reflected uncertainty, suspicion, and self-doubt. I also started to reclaim my own authority. I called my lawyer under the pretense of routine legal updates, asking carefully crafted questions that hinted at oversight and mismanagement on Michael's part. My lawyer, aware of the subtle cues, began quietly reinforcing my control over accounts and property. I wasn't just striking at them, I was fortifying myself, reclaiming ground that had almost been stolen. What thrilled me most was watching Michael try to maintain his composure while the first cracks appeared in his carefully constructed facade. He thought he was untouchable, cleverer than me, but he underestimated one crucial thing: patience and preparation, and a mind fueled not by greed, but by the sting of betrayal. Even Emily began to waver, glancing at me with uncertainty when I mentioned details she hadn't expected me to know. Michael noticed it too, and the tension between them grew, subtle but unmistakable. My quiet, methodical actions were turning the household into a pressure cooker, and they didn't know how close they were to exploding. The tension in the house had become almost unbearable. Michael's smug confidence had begun to crack, a dangerous fissure widening with every calculated step I took. I could feel it in the way he avoided my gaze at dinner, in the tightness of his jaw when Emily tried to cover for him, and in the small mistakes he was now making. Mistakes that were completely uncharacteristic. It was time to escalate. Subtlety had done its work. Now, I needed to force a reckoning. I invited Michael into my study under the guise of reviewing routine estate paperwork. He came in smiling, unknowing, unaware that the trap had been set months before with every misfiled document, every quiet call to his associates, every carefully planted hint that he wasn't as clever as he thought. I sat behind my desk, the papers neatly stacked before me, and gestured to the chair opposite me. Michael, I think it's time we had an honest conversation. He laughed lightly. Honest. We've always been honest, Robert. I allowed myself a thin, sharp smile. Have we? I've been reviewing the accounts, and some things are very troubling. I slid the first folder across the desk. His eyes flickered to it, just a fraction too late to hide the panic. Receipts, contracts, and transactions he thought were invisible now lay bare before him. Emily appeared in the doorway, hesitant. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of fear and confusion. Dad, Michael, what's going on? She asked softly. Michael's voice caught in his throat for the first time in years. Robert, you can't prove. Oh, I can, I interrupted, cutting through his words like a knife. Every forged signature, every hidden transfer, every manipulation, it's all here. And don't think for a second that I don't know about Dr. Larkin. Your little act, bringing a fake doctor into my home to make me doubt myself amateurish. I saw the color drain from their faces. Michael's arrogance had been shattered by careful accumulation of evidence and psychological pressure, and Emily's loyalty was wavering visibly, the cracks too obvious to hide. You underestimated me. I continued, my voice steady, measured. You assumed fear would make me compliant, that manipulation could erode my will. But I've been watching, listening, and planning. You've played a dangerous game, and now the consequences are yours. Michael tried to recover, stammering excuses, but every word fell flat. Emily's eyes met mine, searching, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the daughter I had raised, the part of her that hadn't yet been corrupted. But the reality of their betrayal lingered, and I had no illusions. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. I handed Emily a folder as well, carefully containing evidence of both their actions. See for yourself, I said quietly. I wanted you to know the truth. And Michael, now that you've been exposed, you can either start making amends or face the consequences. The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of betrayal, the enormity of their miscalculations, and the realization that I had anticipated their every move hung heavy in the room. For the first time in years, I felt power in my own home, power I had almost lost. The house was eerily silent the next morning. Michael had retreated to his study, the smugness gone, replaced by a rigid, controlled silence that made him almost unrecognizable. Emily wandered the rooms like a ghost, her eyes avoiding mine as though, by sheer will, she could erase the events of the previous night. But the evidence had already done its work, nothing could undo it. I felt no satisfaction in the way I had imagined revenge might feel. There was no gloating, no triumphant roar, only a heavy, hollow awareness that everything had changed. Our family, the home, the trust we once took for granted, it was gone, replaced by tension, suspicion, and the sharp sting of reality. Michael predictably tried to recover. He attempted to justify, to explain, to manipulate. But I was ready. I had recorded conversations, compiled financial proofs, and documented every attempt at deceit. Each of his excuses, each argument, crumbled under the weight of evidence. He could no longer hide behind charm or fabricated concern. Emily, on the other hand, was more complicated. She approached me in the quiet of the study, tears in her eyes. Dade, I didn't know he would go this far. I didn't know, she whispered. Her voice faltered, shaking with guilt. I wanted to comfort her, to reassure her, but I couldn't. Her choices had helped bring this betrayal to life. She had been an accomplice, even if unwilling at first. Emily, I said slowly, my voice measured, you need to understand something. Betrayal leaves scars. It changes the people involved. You can't undo what's been done. You can only decide what comes next. The consequences of our conflict rippled outward. Michael lost control over my estate. His influence over family finances dissolved. Friends and colleagues who once respected him now hesitated. Their trust in him eroded. He was powerful no longer, reduced to a man scrambling to regain a sense of dignity he had squandered through arrogance and deceit. Emily, too, was changed. The naivete vitae she had once clung to, the belief that love or loyalty could excuse manipulation, was gone. She watched me differently now, no longer as a father to shield her, but as a man whose boundaries were unshakable, whose judgment was precise and final. I, too, felt the weight of the fallout. Revenge had exacted its toll, not physically, but emotionally. I had navigated a labyrinth of deceit, carefully dismantling my family's web of lies. And yet, as victorious as I was in asserting control, there was a loneliness that came with it. Victory had no warmth. Justice had no comfort. But I knew this: if I hadn't acted, I would have lost everything. The home, the money, my sense of self, my dignity. In the aftermath, I realized that consequence is not just punishment for wrongdoers. It is a mirror, reflecting truth back to those who would rather hide from it. Consequences are unavoidable when deception is exposed. Revenge restores balance but leaves an indelible mark on everyone involved. True justice is measured in awareness, not in satisfaction. I locked the study door, a symbolic act as much as a literal one. Outside, the world continued in ignorance of the storm that had passed within these walls. And for the first time in months, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a man who had seen the darkness and survived, not unscathed, but unbroken. True resolution is not revenge alone. It is understanding, reflection, and the reclaiming of one's own power. Betrayal may wound, but courage, patience, and clarity restore balance.